May 28 has been set aside as the day to raise awareness, discuss taboos associated with menstrual hygiene, and to highlight the importance of good menstrual hygiene management with the aim of enabling women and girls to achieve their full potential. Globally, more than half of women are currently of reproductive age, and menstruation is a monthly reality, or for some, a nightmare. In line with this year's Menstrual Hygiene Day theme, it's time for action. And with me to discuss these myths and stigmas surrounding menstruation is a medical practitioner and health influencer, Dr. Egemba Chinonso, popularly known as the Aproko Doctor on social media. Thank you for joining us on Plus TV Africa.
My pleasure.
Okay, what does the Aproko Doctor represent before we dive into this conversation?
Generally, Aproko in Nigerian parlance means someone that talks a lot, someone that talks too much. And I grew up, or rather I went to medical school in a particular town where a lot of people were in the hospitals for things that could be prevented. In other words, if they had lived healthier lifestyles, they would have prevented a lot of the things that got them to the hospital. And so I decided to take it upon myself to tell them about these things in a way that they will be able to understand. And I was not going to let them not stop listening. So hence the name Aproko Doctor, radio without battery. I was just talking. I was like the doctor with the megaphone on the streets crying out.
Okay, so you are the Aproko that brings out the gist we don't know about,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
All right, so what does menstruation mean?
Menstruation is a broad term, but generally it's a monthly event, or could be said as a monthly event, that occurs in the womb or the uterus of every woman. Now, what happens is every month, or rather every cycle, the womb prepares for pregnancy. And so there's a lot of hormones in the body that generates these cells in the inner lining of the womb to get ready for pregnancy. And then when this doesn't happen, it has to shed those cells, shed the lining, and then prepare for a new pregnancy. So every month this happens, we could say menstruation has occurred.
Okay, so at what age does this menstruation start for female?
There's an average age. That average age is 12 years. But you could generally say that if menstruation occurs before 9 years, it is too early. If it occurs after 15 years, it is too late. But the general age it should occur is within 12 years.
So when it occurs before 9 years, does it have any adverse health effect?
When it occurs before 9 years, we say that the person has what is called precocious puberty. Precocious puberty meaning that, puberty is occurring before its time. It could have many medical implications. For example, there could be hormonal imbalance. There could be just a lot of things that could go wrong with people with precocious puberty. Okay,
so when you're talking of people that have crossed the age of 15 and have not experienced this yet, at what age should anyone be worried at all?
When a lady is 15 and has not experienced her first menstrual period, then she should be worried.
Okay.
Should be worried.
From that very point,
From
or you can still
point.
give it some time to say, okay, maybe 18, 17.
From 15, 16, they should, see a gynecologist.
So is menstruation normal? How important is it for a girl child or a woman to go through this cycle every month?
Menstruation is as normal as breathing. It's as normal as taking a dump. Just like we said, the body prepares for pregnancy every month. So it's related to the fertility of a woman. So it is important that every woman has this cycle. This menstruation every cycle. That way we'll be able to, it's a process that occurs in every woman. So it is important that every woman has one.
Okay, so what does menstrual hygiene mean exactly?
If I were to define it, menstrual hygiene is a process. Let me use that word, that where you have clean materials. There's certain keywords that come into play. One of them is using clean materials to absorb the menstrual effluent, so the menstrual blood. and can be changed privately, safely, and in a hygienic manner for as often as the period continues. So if the period lasts for as long as 5 days, then this clean, hygienic, safe changing of the clean materials should be done for the period of the menstruation.
Okay, so now that you're talking of cleanliness and being hygienic, in low-income countries, there is a severe lack of resources as bleeding persons' choices of menstrual hygiene material are often limited, right? And then girls stay at home from school because they probably cannot afford getting a menstrual pad or whatever they need at the time to take care of themselves. And of course, World Health Organizations recommends at least one toilet to 25 students. We know what is going on in our public schools. It's not like that. So what is the way forward? How are we managing the situation, and how are these girls surviving?
One of the ways that this is being managed is the introduction of reusable pads. There's a particular one that was introduced recently called safe pads. Safe pads are reusable pads that have antibacterial properties. In other words, they help to prevent the growth of bacteria even when the lady is menstruating. Now, what happens is with the conventional reusable pads, you have to, wash them with a lot of water. You have to dry them out in the sun before you use them again. But with these safe pads, you don't have to use a lot of water.
Okay.
You can use little soap or no soap at all. And I was really surprised but the research has shown that it's quite safe. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it was very interesting to note that. And you don't need to dry them out in the sun. So if a lady is concerned about flagging her evidence of menstruation out in the sun, she can dry them in the house and it will still be safe to use.
So these areas you're talking about sometimes are not opportune to have very clean waters. What type of water? If you say it doesn't need soap and you say it has antibacterial substances, properties, what type of water? Can they just use any water to wash it?
Just clean water, but not as much as you would use in the conventional reusable pads.
Okay.
Yes.
So where can these safe reusable pads be gotten?
Personally, at this point, I think there are some non-governmental organizations that could help introduce them to, especially in developing countries like ours, where we could have introduction of these safe reusable pads in now.
So it's not something you can just walk into anywhere and get it. It has to be, you have to be taught how to use it or be given to, I don't know.
You have to be taught how to use it. There has to be a lot of awareness, advocacy, education about the use of this pad. And so there are initiatives, organizations that are helping to bring this into this part of the world to help introduce the use, especially in low-income countries, so that we don't have ladies competing. We have the price of pads competing with the price of food, especially in a country like Nigeria, where the average person spends 60% of income on just food alone. How much more menstrual pads? And so for some people, reusable pads, you could search online, you could see. But for the girl child who is in the rural areas, it's not easily gotten. And so there's still need for awareness. There's still need for the government to help bring these products to the girls here.
All right, we'll come back to that because I need to understand how these girls are going to lay hands on something that's looking like the only option they have right now. But that will be right after this break, and we'll continue with our conversation with Dr. Egemba. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Plus TV Africa, and we are still discussing menstruation with Dr. Egemba. Before we went on the break, we were talking about reusable pad, and from what I understand, that is almost the only option people in rural areas have to be able to take care of themselves hygienically, right?
Yeah.
And now you're making me understand that it is not easily accessible to these people still. So how can that be solved? Because if you're saying this is their solution and they don't have it, what can we do?
The girl child has to be a priority.
Okay.
And so, just like I said earlier, advocacy, awareness about this, the help of initiatives. For example, we have initiative, Health for Africa, initiative that focuses on the girl child. And initiatives like this could help bring the awareness on the part of the government to be able to, make this a focus. That way, the availability of these products will be increased for girls like this to be able to use.
So how can one maintain menstrual health hygiene generally?
Generally, there are a couple of principles. The first is take a bath. That's good thing because most women complain of a certain kind of smell when they're having their period, and this could also prevent them from, coming to public places, especially like schools. And so taking a bath generally, washing your hands after changing your pads or tampons or whatever you're using, washing your hands generally, making sure that your pads are disposed of properly. One way this can be done, or rather the approved way baths should be disposed of, if you're using the disposable kind, the kind that cannot be reused again, is to burn them.
Okay. But
if you're living in areas where this is not easily available, then disposing them off properly should also be done. So keeping them in special containers that can be carted off and not dropped where everybody else drops there, because they do not just pose harm to both, or rather they pose harm generally to both you who's taking it, or rather you who has the menstruation, and other people who could come in contact with the menstrual products. A lady may need to change especially ladies who have heavy menstruation. They could have a medical condition, and so their menstruation is heavier than normal. They don't need to wait for 8 hours. They may need to change every 2 hours or every 3 hours. And so changing regularly before it's soaked is also important. Tampons, if you're using disposable kinds, could pose a health risk, or rather leaving tampons in, let me use that word, for long periods could pose a health risk, because unlike sanitary pads, the products are leaving your vagina immediately. For tampons, it's still in your vagina, and so it could get soaked, and bacteria could find its way into your bloodstream and could cause another problem. We'll call it toxic shock syndrome. And so if you're going to use that kind of product, and then you should change more regularly than you would if you were to use the sanitary pads. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's a new one. At least I've learned something. So let's talk about stigma. There's still stigma in the society when it comes to menstruation. I mean, especially from the male folks and even the society in general. Like, they don't want to talk about it openly. It's something they want you to keep hush, 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 hush. Now, how do we make them understand that this is important? It is not a disease. It is something we all should go through. Like, women don't have a choice.
One of the first things that needs to happen is understanding that it's a physiological process. Making them understand that it is as normal as any physiological process in the body. It's as normal as breathing. It's as normal as going to take a pee. And removing the stigma around this could not just start from this, but could also go as far as educating the religious leaders, educating the community leaders, educating the boys, educating the men, educating some women who may have, some perceived notions about menstruation. Because, for example, I would say a story. I went to a store once to get a phone, and the lady who was attending to me happened to be on a monthly period, and she was stained. And so there was the dilemma. Do I tell her? Or do I just let it slide? And because I understood that it's a normal physiological process, I was able to tell her, hey, I think you're stained. And she said, thank you, but you could tell that she was embarrassed a lot. Now, I could understand her embarrassment, but these are the things that we also need to understand, that it's a physiological process. You don't need to be embarrassed about it. It's not your fault that you're menstruating. It's what happens to every woman. And so education is still one of the things that would help relieve or remove the stigma that's associated with this. You know, moving beyond the religious barriers, moving beyond the cultural barriers. There's certain religions or cultures where people have to be, you know, set aside during their menstrual period and not allowed to mingle with other people because they are perceived dirty during that, or unclean during that period. And so these are some of the things that need to be changed. These are some of the discussions that we need to have. We might need to have open house discussions about these issues and let everybody come out and let the education go on. Let people understand that this is more of a physiological process than any other thing.
Okay, I'd like to know where this education is supposed to start from, but before we get into that, let's go on a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue with our conversation with Dr. Egemba. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is One on One, and my name is Elsie Godwin. We've been chatting with Dr. Egemba, and he's been helping us understand how important menstruation is to women and to everyone. So men and boys influence women and girls' experiences of their menstruation through their roles as fathers, husbands, brothers, peers, teachers, you know, all round, right? How can we make men and boys help girls during their period?
Supporting.
In what way?
In making sure that, okay, but before a man is able to support, a man has to understand that this is a normal process. It's like pregnancy. Okay. And so I have seen cases of, you know, people avoiding their partners during their menstrual period. And when I mean it, I mean avoiding totally, and he doesn't want to come close. Probably because, you know, she also has some mood swings that are also normal during her period, because these are affected by hormones. And so some people may even have menstrual syndrome, premenstrual syndrome, that, you know, could mood swings, their mood just changes all of a sudden, and you know, they don't want to get into the whole mushy syndrome that occurs at that period, and so they tend to avoid them. Some also say things about, you know, a smell, and so they tend to avoid. And understanding that it's a normal process would help you give the support that she would need at that particular point in time, because like we said earlier, it's not her fault. It's a normal process. And so educating the men is also important. You can't just educate the girl child about menstruation without doing so to the men, which is one of the reasons why I always talk about the Heal for Africa initiative. I love what the lady behind it is doing. She doesn't just educate the girl child. She goes as far as educating the boy child about menstruation. And so when they already have that notion growing up, when they become men in society, they're able to play better roles when a lady is having a menstrual period. Okay, for the boy child, at what age should this education start? I was going to ask that before. I feel that at the moment where you start to teach sex education, at the moment where this sex education happens, you should be able to introduce facts and figures about menstruation. What is the fixed age for that? I cannot necessarily say at this point, but, you know, at the points where the curiosity starts to happen, because then you have to show pictures, and most parents are not open to teaching the children, for example, teaching the boy child about the female reproductive organs, because they feel, especially in this part of the world, that you're going to spoil their children, and and so these children go elsewhere and get the information that, you know, they need, and depending on which source is giving them the information, they could either come out more informed or could come out damaged. So at the moment where you start to teach your child about sex education, I feel that education about menstruation also has to come in.
Okay, you mentioned PMS.
Yeah.
Can you touch a bit on that? Why does it vary for different women?
The PMS, premenstrual syndrome, could vary. Why? Because most women respond to hormones differently. I've met people who have not had one case. They just have their periods and that's it. It's normal for them. I also have women who complain of breast pain. Some people their breasts become tender. Some people become swollen. For some people, some people have diarrhea. Some people have headaches. Some people, at some point in time, they may even have migraines. And like we said, the womb is preparing for pregnancy in every cycle. There are hormones controlled by the brain, or rather hormones controlled by the brain that affects these hormones that affect the womb and the development. Now, when this happens, it's not just the womb it's affecting other organs in the body. One could say that the same hormones they would have as PMS could also be the same things that happen during pregnancy. For example, during pregnancy, some women may develop diarrhea. At the same time, a woman may go through pregnancy not experiencing one episode of diarrhea. So it could differ from woman to woman depending on the makeup, the family history. There is no clear indication of why this happens.
Okay, so I know there are myths when it comes to menstruation, and these myths have, to an extent, helped drive the stigma we have now. What would you say is the most ridiculous myth you've heard?
The most ridiculous myth I heard was on social media. I came across a picture of a woman who had a very swollen abdomen and a lot of things were brought out from her. I think they looked like fibroids and all. And someone put, if you drink cold water during your menstruation, you're going to have cancer of the womb. And I think till date, that is the most ridiculous thing I've heard about menstruation. It is false. It has no scientific backing to it. Like we said, it's a normal process. And so the same things you were doing normally are the same things that you should continue doing normally during your period. And there are others like period sex, which is another very sensitive area for most people to go into. And this could happen because it's the same thing. We still think that it's dirty, forgetting that this is the normal process that happens.
So are you saying period sex is not dirty?
Period sex could be messy, but for people who are already married or in a regular sexual relationship, they could have it. Is it advisable? No. But could it be had at that particular point in time? Yes. So period sex could be had, but it's not generally advised because for some people find it messy. Some people like to stay off it until the period is done and then they can resume.
Okay, let's talk about menstrual cramps before I let you go. I know it can be hell for so many, and for some, like you said, it just comes and goes like nothing, right? Is there any precautionary measures to take to make sure the cramp is a bit reduced?
There are a lot of advice on the internet, or rather there is a lot of advice on the internet. Some people say don't eat certain kinds of food. Some people say bathe with hot water. I have found hot water bottles to be quite effective in some women. Some women would have cases where they would need to take drugs like NSAIDs to help reduce the amount of pain that they feel. But if the pain is more than it should be, or the pain is becoming hell and a woman gets palpitations every time she thinks of a next period coming, and I think she should be evaluated by a gynecologist because there could be some underlying problem. For example, fibroids. Fibroids could come as painful periods, and when you take care of the fibroids, in most women, the painful periods tend to go by themselves.
All right, thank you so much for chatting with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Let's round off this episode by talking about the 5 myths about period we must end now. Number 1 is women will contaminate food. In a study done in a random school in rural India, 55% of girls surveyed believed they could not cook or enter the kitchen during and 4 days after menstruation or food was sour. Now, bringing it back to Nigeria, while growing up, I heard people say whatever food cooked by a woman during her period will not taste good. This is absolutely untrue. You can cook whenever you want, as your blood flow cannot affect your cooking skills. Now, number 2 says women cannot enter holy places. This myth exists in parts of the world, ranging from Bali, India, and even here in Nigeria. Women are believed to be unclean while menstruating and are not allowed to enter clean and holy places like temples and churches. This is a form of gender inequality that limits women from the same human rights like freedom to practice religion that men have access to. Girls and women menstruating are not unclean. They are normal, natural, and healthy. Now, number 3 says sanitary pads need to be kept unseen. It should be kept private and covered in paper while purchasing. Now, I'll tell you a story. One day, a neighbor came to my room. This neighbor, now who has become a friend, walked into my room. She saw a pack of sanitary pad on my bed stool and immediately became uncomfortable. She said I was not being careful enough or woman enough, in her own words, because my sanitary pads should not be kept in the open. As usual, she couldn't defend her stance. There is nothing to be ashamed of, and for this reason, UNICEF implemented a massive menstrual education program in hopes of increasing access to proper menstrual products and sanitation facilities. Now, number 4 says girls having their period should not go near or touch plants because the plants will die if they do so. Now, this is another ridiculous myth, as plants do not discriminate. Neither is the woman body radiating dangerous chemicals that just because they come near a plant or because she's menstruating, the plant will die. Plants thrive on good care like all of us, irrespective of who it is it comes from. And the final one is, a girl should not talk about her periods in public. If she does, she will be ashamed or shamed publicly. Oh dear. I remember the first time I shared a piece on Facebook about my butt paining me during menstruation. I got messages from people saying I should not be talking about things like that in public space. I simply asked them why, and of course, they couldn't logically defend their stance. Do you think twice before you talk about your hair, your eyeliner, your eyelashes, your nail polish? Talking about period is not different. The bottom line here is period taboos are not only crazy and ridiculous, but they are a huge obstacle holding women back in many ways. It is difficult to believe this myth still exists all over the world, but they do, and they need to be stopped. Awareness and education, especially for people in rural and developing countries, is necessary to empower girls and women everywhere. Also, note that taking care of yourself during menstruation is as important as taking care of your day-to-day activities. My name is Elsie Godwin. Thank you for watching.